At Vision.org, we've been talking about the problems facing human society for more than 25 years. The first episode of this program warned of such issues early in 2012, but I've never seen so many others in so many fields warn of impending global catastrophe as I do now. Even so, most try to be optimistic, and there is hope, but there's more to the story. With an eye on the human condition, this is Insight. In his 2023 book titled How to Fix a Broken Planet, Julian Cribb lays out a plan to solve the top 10 existential problems threatening humanity. He joins others in calling for an Earth System Treaty, described as a legal framework that covers all the risks we presently run and seeks to have humans live within a safe operating space. He believes it will require the mobilization of ordinary citizens because governments are severely limited by procrastination and short-term goals. He says only through these billions of concerned citizens acting together can politics, commerce, religion, and society be induced to adopt wisdom and make the changes essential to our survival as a civilization and as a species. Yet even this hopeful observer is cautious about the outcome. He says the question is whether humans still have the intelligence and the wisdom to adopt these solutions. Despite such an ambitious and laudable plan, the thought persists that we may already have passed the point of no return. The problems are multifaceted, interconnected, intensifying, and global. The adjectives used to describe them are unprecedented, existential, irreversible, apocalyptic. The terms and phrases permacrisis, defining moment, tipping point, biblical proportions, mass extinction, and systemic collapse. What has brought us to this moment? The threat of imminent collapse is linked in most cases to the industrialization that began in the mid-19th century. The large-scale burning of coal and the development of steam power led to the rapid expansion of railway systems and the age of technological invention and automated production. The rapid expansion of trade and industry in the post-World War II era after 1945 accelerated the world toward the present distressing situation. Today, across-the-board exponential increases have become so familiar that they're often overlooked. But notice how much has changed since 1950. On the socio-economic level, world population has risen dramatically, along with primary energy use and fertilizer consumption. Compare these trends with what has happened at the Earth systems level. Notice the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, surface temperature, and marine fish capture, to name just a few. Regardless of which threat is in question, nothing can increase exponentially indefinitely. Because humans are implicated in these patterns, the geological period in which we find ourselves has been named the Anthropocene, which is defined by collapsologists Pablo Savine and Raphael Stevens as a time when humans have become a force that upsets the major biogeochemical cycles of the Earth system. Again, the year 1945 looms large, when the first nuclear explosions deposited a global layer of radioactive atoms. Those who study collapse point to exponential trends across socio-economic and Earth systems, as we've seen. These include pollution, flooding, deforestation, species extinction, greenhouse gases, and ocean acidification, among other dire indicators. As former French Environment Minister Yves Cochet has said, we've never had so many indications of the possibility of an imminent global collapse. One threat that has receded for many is that of nuclear war. They say despite the threat, nothing has happened in 70 years. But the fact that such an eventuality never materialized during the decades of the Cold War and since doesn't mean that the threat should no longer be considered. Among the other existential risks that threaten our world, nuclear war remains the most imminent. The 2022 report from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, noted alarmingly that in that year, the 9 states that possess nuclear weapons were all engaged in upgrading their nuclear arsenals. A bipartisan report to the U.S. Congress in October 2023 stated that both Russia and China will be nuclear peers with the U.S. within the 2027 to 2035 window. The authors commented, "The vision of a world without nuclear weapons is more improbable now than ever. The new global environment is fundamentally different than anything experienced in the past, even in the darkest days of the Cold War." Accordingly, the U.S. Congressional Commission recommended the replacement of all U.S. nuclear delivery systems and the modernization of their warheads. Similar to the reluctance of some to consider nuclear war as a present threat, despite these ongoing warnings, there's an unwillingness to consider religious or biblical references beyond their use as a metaphor or in a secularized way. Some even reject this approach altogether. In their book on collapse, Savine and Stevens write, "We will not be dealing with millenarian eschatology." That's to say, they reject utopian concepts of a world after the end times. However, there's an often overlooked way in which end time studies are directly relevant to the study of collapse. I'm not talking in fundamentalist terms now, in a narrow sectarian way, but in biblical terms, there is a literal end time that speaks to human power gone awry, to cascading crises of human origin, and to real hope for humanity. The premier apocalyptic work is the first-century biblical book of Revelation, whose Greek name means unveiling. Reading it 20 centuries later, what it has to say about the world in the end time is strangely familiar. In terms of human power and pride in material achievement and the ruining of the earth, it describes a globalized human society in an incredibly destructive mode. So much so that God announces the time has come, quote, to destroy those who destroy the earth, those who plunder its resources and despoil the earth. Even God cannot solve the problem without bringing an end to those who've persistently refused to choose the right path. The system's predatory and violent attitude extends to a long list of the world's tradable goods and luxuries. These include food and drink, precious metals, exotic furnishings, precious stones, weapons, and most disturbingly, the exploitation of the bodies and souls or minds of men. Here we're dealing with a world that cannot be saved unless the system is overcome. Its political powers, international merchants, shipping companies, and global magnates show no inclination to change their corrupt allegiances and are shocked when the system suddenly and completely fails. So where is the hope? Since in Revelation the system has run out of time and its participants are unwilling to change, the only hope lies in God's intervention to prevent self-destruction and human annihilation, and in the remnant few who've committed to an entirely different path. In a passage referring to a great crisis at the end of this present age, Jesus is quoted as saying that it will be a time like no other, a time when all human life could be extinguished. Nuclear weapons have already made this possible, yet it promises that a remnant will be saved alive. If those days had not been cut short, no one would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Only God can do this. And an elect or saved and saving remnant will play a role in the transition to a new world. How do we choose between good and evil? How do we accept the challenge to practice moral responsibility now? How do we become part of a humble saving remnant? It requires a complete change of approach. It's about a new identity, about asking and answering the questions of who I am and who am I supposed to be. It's about discovering the God who rescues. In this way, there is hope. If you'd like to know more, visit our website at vision.org. For Insight, I'm David Hume.